The sweltering heat shimmered above the dusty road as Katherine Everett's scream pierced the afternoon air. Her wagon, loaded with everything she owned in the world, was sinking deeper into the rushing waters of the Steptoe Creek, just outside Ely, Nevada territory. The year was 1871, and Catherine Kate, to those who knew her, was watching her dreams disappear beneath the swirling current. "Whoa, hold steady," she called to her panicking horses, their whites of their eyes visible as they thrashed against their harnesses. The spring melt had turned the usually placid creek into a torrent, and now the wagon wheels were buried deep in the muddy riverbed. Kate had made a terrible miscalculation, thinking the crossing shallow enough to ford. Now she stood knee-deep in rushing water, her blue calico dress plastered against her legs, trying desperately to calm her team. At 23, Catherine was no stranger to hardship. Orphaned during the war and widowed barely a year into her marriage, she had packed up her meager possessions in St. Louis and headed west, answering an advertisement for a schoolteacher position in the growing mining town of Ely. The journey had been arduous, but she'd made it this far only to be stopped within sight of her destination by a river that refused to let her pass. "Need a hand, madam?" The deep voice came from behind her, causing Kate to whirl around, nearly losing her footing in the current. The man sat atop a chestnut stallion at the river's edge. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore the dust of the trail on his clothes and the confidence of someone who knew the land intimately. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but Kate could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of beard. "I believe I do," Kate admitted, pushing a strand of wet auburn hair from her face. "Unless you know of a dry crossing nearby." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to a nearby cottonwood. "Not for miles, and certainly not one you could reach before losing that wagon entirely." He waded into the water, seemingly unbothered by the current that threatened to topple Kate. "Name's Fletcher Kincaid," he said as he reached her. "Folks call me Fletch. Katherine Everett," she replied, suddenly aware of how bedraggled she must look. "I'm the new schoolteacher for Ely." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Well, Miss Everett, you won't be teaching anybody if you and your worldly possessions wash downstream. Let's see what we can do about this predicament." Fletch examined the wagon's position with a practiced eye. The left rear wheel had sunk deep into a hidden hole, tilting the entire wagon at a precarious angle. Water was already lapping at the floorboards. "Your timing is fortunate, Mr. Kincaid," Kate said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Another few minutes and I might have been swimming." "Let's save the gratitude for when your wheels are on solid ground," he replied, rolling up his sleeves to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. "I need to get my rope. Don't move." As he waded back to shore, Kate took a moment to study him. There was something reassuring about Fletcher Kincaid, a steadiness that stood in stark contrast to her current situation. He moved with purpose, retrieving a coiled rope from his saddle and returning to the wagon. "I'll need to secure this to your wagon frame and my horse," he explained. "Then we'll need to unhitch your team and lead them to shore. They'll only panic more if we try this with them still attached." Kate nodded, moving to the horses' heads to calm them while Fletch worked. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, securing the rope to the wagon's undercarriage. "You know what you're doing," she observed. "Not my first river rescue," he replied, glancing at her with eyes that she now saw were a deep green, like the pine forest she'd passed through in the Sierra Nevada. "I've been driving cattle across these territories for 8 years now. Water crossings come with the territory." Working together, they managed to unhitch the team and lead the skittish horses to shore. Once they were secured, Fletch returned to the wagon, checking that it hadn't sunk further. "Now comes the tricky part," he said. "I need you to stand clear. If that rope snaps, it could take a man's head clean off." "And what will you be doing?" Kate asked, concern furrowing her brow. "I'll be in the water, making sure your wagon doesn't flip when we start pulling. Sometimes these rescues need a guiding hand." Before Kate could protest the danger, Fletch was positioning himself at the submerged wheel, bracing his shoulders against the wagon bed. "When I give the word, slap my horse on the flank," he instructed. "He knows what to do." Kate stood by the powerful chestnut, one hand poised above its hindquarters. The animal seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, standing alert with ears forward. "Now," Fletch's voice carried over the sound of rushing water. Kate brought her hand down firmly on the horse's flank. The animal surged forward, muscles bunching as it threw its weight against the rope. The line went taut, water spraying as tension built. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sucking sound that was nearly lost beneath the river's gurgle, the wagon wheel began to rise from its muddy prison. Fletch strained against the wagon's side, guiding it as the horse pulled steadily. Inch by inch, the wagon moved, water cascading off the bed as it emerged from the creek. When the wheels finally caught on solid ground, the vehicle lurched forward suddenly, nearly bowling over Fletch. He staggered but kept his footing, moving with the wagon until it was safely on the riverbank. Kate rushed to where Fletch stood, breathing hard, water streaming from his clothes. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. "I would have lost everything." His body stiffened for a moment in surprise, then relaxed. Gently, he set her back from him, though his hands remained on her shoulders. "Just being neighborly, Miss Everett," he said, though something in his eyes suggested he was affected by her proximity. "Let's get your team hitched up again. Ely's still a few miles off, and you'll want to reach town before dark." They worked in companionable silence, reattaching the horses to the wagon. Kate was impressed by how Fletch spoke softly to the animals, calming them with a gentle touch and reassuring words. Her late husband had never shown such patience with beasts or with her, for that matter. "How far are you traveling with your cattle, Mr. Kincaid?" Kate asked as they finished securing the harnesses. "Just delivered them to the Box K ranch south of here," he replied. "I'm headed into Ely myself for supplies before moving on to my next job." "Then perhaps you wouldn't mind escorting a bedraggled schoolteacher the rest of the way," Kate suggested, surprised at her own boldness. "I'd feel safer with someone who knows the route." Fletch hesitated, and for a moment Kate thought he would refuse. Then he nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "It would be my pleasure, Miss Everett," he said, untying his horse, "though I should warn you I'm not much for conversation. After the excitement of nearly losing my wagon, I believe I could use some quiet," Kate replied with a smile of her own. They set off side by side, Kate driving her wagon while Fletch rode alongside. True to his word, he spoke little, but Kate found his silent presence comforting. She used the time to gather her wits and dry out as much as possible in the warm afternoon sun. As they traveled, Kate noticed how Fletch's eyes constantly scanned the horizon, alert to every movement, every sound. There was a wariness to him that spoke of hard-earned lessons. "Have you always been a cowboy, Mr. Kincaid?" she asked, breaking the silence as they crested a rise that offered the first view of Ely in the distance. "Since I was old enough to sit a horse," he replied. "My father ran cattle in Texas before the war. When he didn't come home, I took to the trail. Been moving from job to job ever since." "No place to call home?" He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Home is wherever I hang my hat, Miss Everett. The open country suits me fine," Kate nodded, understanding more than he might have guessed. "I know something about starting over. My husband died of fever barely a year after we wed. I've been making my own way since then." Fletch's gaze softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Kate said, surprised by how little pain accompanied the words now. Time had dulled the edges of her grief, leaving mostly a hollow sense of what might have been. "Coming west was my chance to begin again." "Ely's a good town for new beginnings," Fletch offered. "Rough around the edges, but decent folk for the most part. The minings brought in all sorts, some looking to strike it rich, others just looking for honest work." "And what will the townsfolk make of their new schoolteacher arriving soaking wet and escorted by a cowboy?" Kate asked with a small laugh. Fletch's lips quirked upward. "They'll have plenty to gossip about over supper, that's certain." As they approached the outskirts of town, Kate felt a flutter of nervousness. This would be her home now, these strangers her neighbors and the children her responsibility. She smoothed her damp hair as best she could, wishing she could present a more dignified first impression. "The schoolhouse is at the far end of town," Fletch informed her. There's a small living quarters attached to the back. Not much, but it's yours with the position. You seem to know a lot about it, Kate observed. I helped build it last fall, he said simply. The town council decided Ely needed proper schooling if they wanted to attract more families. Minors with children need somewhere to send them during the day. The main street of Ely was bustling with activity despite the late hour. Horses and wagons lined the dirt road, and men in various states of dust and fatigue moved between the saloon, general store, and a Sayer's office. A few women in calico dresses hurried along the boardwalks, baskets on their arms. All activity seemed to pause momentarily as Kate's wagon rolled into town, flanked by the tall cowboy on his chestnut horse. Fletch guided them past curious onlookers toward a modest clapboard building at the edge of town. Unlike most of the hastily constructed structures that line the main street, the schoolhouse had been built with care, painted white with green trim and sporting a small bell tower. Beside it stood a smaller building that Kate assumed would be her new home. As they pulled up in front of the schoolhouse, a stout woman in a crisp blue dress hurried toward them from the direction of the general store. "You must be Miss Everett," she called, her round face creased in a welcoming smile. "We'd nearly given up on you today. I'm Martha Simmons, head of the school board and wife to the town doctor." Kate climbed down from her wagon, painfully aware of her damp, wrinkled dress and disheveled appearance. "I apologize for my tardiness, Mrs. Simmons. I had some trouble at the creek crossing." Martha's gaze shifted to Fletch, who had dismounted and was standing respectfully to one side, hat in hand. "Fletcher Kincaid," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't expect to see you back in Ely so soon." "Just passing through, Mrs. Simmons," he replied with a polite nod. "Had the good fortune to assist Miss Everett when her wagon was caught in the creek." Martha's eyes widened. "Goodness, you must have been terrified, my dear." "Thank the Lord Mr. Kincaid happened along." She turned back to Fletch. "That was very kind of you, Fletcher." Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story than Kate knew, but Fletch merely nodded again. Anyone would have done the same. "Well," Martha said, turning her attention back to Kate, "let's get you settled. You must be exhausted after your journey and in need of dry clothes besides." She gestured to the small building beside the schoolhouse. "That's your living quarters. It's simple but comfortable. The town took up a collection to furnish it properly." "That's very kind," Kate said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "I'll help unload your wagon," Fletch offered, already moving to the back of the vehicle. "Oh, that won't be necessary," Martha interjected quickly. "My husband and son can assist Miss Everett later. I'm sure you have business to attend to in town." A brief flicker of something annoyance, resignation, crossed Fletch's face, but he stepped back with a nod. "As you say, Mrs. Simmons." Kate felt a pang of disappointment. She had hoped to properly thank the man who had saved not just her wagon but potentially her life as well. "Mr. Kincaid," she said, stepping toward him, "I cannot express my gratitude enough for your assistance today." Fletch replaced his hat, tipping it slightly in her direction. "It was nothing, Miss Everett. Welcome to Ely." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary, and Kate felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. "Will you be in town long?" she found herself asking. "A day or two at most," he replied. "Trail boss needs supplies before we head north." "Then perhaps I'll see you again before you leave," Kate said. "I'd like to repay your kindness somehow." "No repayment necessary," he assured her, though a small smile touched his lips. "Good day, ladies." Kate watched as he mounted his horse and rode back toward the center of town, his broad shoulders straight, his posture easy in the saddle. Only when he had disappeared from view did she realize Martha was watching her with undisguised interest. "Come along, dear," the older woman said, taking Kate's arm. "Let's get you inside and hear all about your journey and your encounter with Mr. Kincaid." There was something in Martha's tone that suggested she had more to say about the cowboy, but Kate was too tired to press. For now, she was grateful to have arrived safely in Ely, ready to begin her new life, though she couldn't help but wonder if their paths would cross again before Fletcher Kincaid rode out of town. As Martha led her toward her new home, Kate glanced back at the wagon that had carried her across half a continent. If not for the cowboy's timely intervention, it might now be scattered along the creek bed, along with all her hopes for the future. A strange feeling settled in her chest, something beyond mere gratitude. Her wagon had been stuck in the river. The cowboy had pulled it free, and somehow, inexplicably, her heart had followed. The interior of Kate's new home was indeed simple, but welcoming: a single room with a curtained-off sleeping area, a small cast-iron stove, a pine table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair positioned near the sole window. A bookshelf stood against one wall, empty and waiting for her collection of beloved volumes, still packed in her wagon. "It's lovely," Kate said sincerely, running her hand along the smooth wood of the table. "The ladies of the church sewing circle made these curtains," Martha explained, touching the cheerful yellow fabric. "And Dr. Simmons contributed the rocking chair. We wanted you to feel welcome." "I'm touched by everyone's generosity," Kate said, blinking back unexpected tears. After months of traveling alone, the kindness of strangers was overwhelming. Martha patted her arm. "You rest here while I fetch my son to help with your things. I'll bring over some supper as well, you must be famished." Left alone, Kate took the opportunity to change out of her damp clothes, retrieving a spare dress from the small carpet bag she'd kept with her on the wagon seat. As she moved about the room, settling into her new space, her thoughts kept returning to Fletcher Kincaid. There had been something compelling about him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with his physical prowess, considerable though that had been when pulling her wagon from the creek. Martha returned within the hour, accompanied by a strapping young man she introduced as her son Thomas. Between them, they quickly unloaded Kate's trunks and boxes, placing them according to her instructions. Martha had also brought a covered dish of stew and freshly baked bread. "You'll join us for Sunday supper tomorrow," Martha insisted as she prepared to leave. "It's important for the town to meet their new schoolmistress properly." "I'd be delighted," Kate replied. "And when might I see the schoolroom? I'll need to prepare before classes begin." "I'll take you over first thing in the morning," Martha promised. "School term starts in a week, which should give you plenty of time to get settled and organized." After they left, Kate sat at her table, savoring the rich beef stew and contemplating the twist her day had taken. From near disaster at the creek to being safely ensconced in her new home, all because a wandering cowboy had happened along at precisely the right moment. Sleep came easily that night, her body exhausted from the physical and emotional strain of the day. Her dreams, however, were restless, filled with rushing water, strong hands and green eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed composure. Morning brought the sound of church bells, pulling Kate from her slumber. She dressed quickly in her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her auburn hair in a simple but elegant style. First impressions mattered, especially for a schoolteacher in a small town. Martha arrived promptly after breakfast, keys in hand, to show Kate the schoolroom. The building was larger than it had appeared from outside, with rows of sturdy desks facing a raised teacher's platform. A blackboard covered most of the front wall, and tall windows let in ample light. A small stove in the corner would provide heat during the winter months. "We have 23 children enrolled so far," Martha explained as Kate explored the room. "Ages 6 to 14. Some of the mining families are still deciding whether to send their children." "It's a fine schoolroom," Kate said, already envisioning how she would arrange things. "Mr. Kincaid mentioned he helped build it." Martha's expression shifted subtly. "Yes, Fletcher was part of the construction crew last fall. He visits Ely periodically." Kate sensed there was more to the story. "He seems well regarded." Martha sighed, her round face softening. "Fletcher Kincaid is a complicated man, Miss Everett. He's respected for his abilities and work ethic, but he's not exactly embraced by everyone in town." She hesitated, then added, "There was an incident a few years back, a misunderstanding, but some still hold it against him." "What kind of incident?" Kate asked, curiosity piqued. "It's not my story to tell," Martha replied primly. "Just know that, while he's a decent man at heart, Fletcher Kincaid keeps to himself for good reason. He's not one for putting down roots." The warning was clear, though Kate hadn't asked for one. She changed the subject. inquiring about the curriculum and school supplies. But her thoughts kept circling back to the cowboy with the green eyes and the apparent history in Ely that no one wanted to discuss openly. After reviewing the schoolroom, Martha insisted Kate accompany her to church, where she was introduced to what seemed like the entire population of Ely. She shook countless hands, trying desperately to memorize names and faces of parents whose children would soon be in her care. It was only as the service ended and the congregation filed out into the sunlit churchyard that Kate spotted him. Fletcher Kincaid stood apart from the crowd, freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes, though he still wore his trail-worn boots. He was speaking with an older man Kate recognized as the proprietor of the general store. Their eyes met across the churchyard, and Kate felt that same inexplicable flutter in her chest. Without thinking, she moved toward him, threading her way through clusters of townspeople. "Mr. Kincaid," she said when she reached him. "I'm pleased to see you're still in town." He touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Everett, you're looking well. Seems you've recovered from yesterday's adventure." "Thanks to you," she replied. "I never properly expressed my gratitude." The storekeeper, a man named Wilson according to the brief introduction, excused himself with a knowing smile that made Kate's cheeks warm. "You settling in all right?" Fletch asked, his voice low and private despite the crowded churchyard. "Yes, though I've yet to meet all my future pupils. Mrs. Simmons says there are 23 enrolled so far." "Good number," he nodded. "Town's growing, need a proper education for the young uns." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unasked questions and unspoken thoughts. Kate was acutely aware of curious glances from the churchgoers around them. "Will you be at the Sunday supper?" she finally asked. "Mrs. Simmons has invited me to join her family." A shadow crossed his face. "No, madam, got business to attend to. We're heading out at first light tomorrow." Disappointment settled in Kate's stomach, surprising her with its intensity. "So soon? Trail boss is anxious to get moving," he explained. "Cattle drive won't wait." "Of course," Kate nodded, trying to mask her reaction. "Well, I wish you safe travels, Mr. Kincaid." He studied her face for a moment, as if memorizing her features. "Perhaps our paths will cross again, Miss Everett. Ely isn't so far from the cattle trails." "I would like that," she admitted, her honesty surprising even herself. A small smile touched his lips. "Then I'll look forward to it." Before either could say more, Martha Simmons appeared at Kate's elbow. "There you are, Miss Everett. We're about to head home for dinner." Her eyes flickered to Fletch, acknowledging him with a cool nod. "Mr. Kincaid, Mrs. Simmons," he replied evenly. "I was just wishing Miss Everett well in her new position." "How thoughtful," Martha said, her tone suggesting she found it anything but. "Come along, dear. My husband is eager to meet you properly." Kate allowed herself to be led away, glancing back over her shoulder. Fletch still stood where she'd left him, watching her go, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. The Sunday dinner at the Simmons household was a lively affair, with the doctor proving to be as garrulous as his wife. Their son Thomas, a young man of 20, was clearly being encouraged to pay particular attention to Kate, serving her first and engaging her in conversation about her journey west. Throughout the meal, Kate found her thoughts repeatedly straying to Fletcher Kincaid. What was the incident Martha had alluded to? Why did some in town seem to regard him with such wariness? "Miss Everett," Dr. Simmons's voice pulled her from her reverie. "I asked if you'd had the opportunity to explore our fair town yet." "I'm afraid not," Kate replied, covering her lapse in attention with a smile. "I've only just arrived yesterday, as you know." "Then Thomas must give you a proper tour tomorrow," Martha declared, beaming at her son. "Ely may be small, but we're quite proud of our community." Thomas flushed but nodded eagerly. "It would be my pleasure, Miss Everett." Kate accepted graciously, though her enthusiasm was tempered by the knowledge that by tomorrow Fletcher Kincaid would be gone, headed north with his cattle drive. She chided herself for this preoccupation with a man she barely knew, a drifting cowboy with no intention of staying in one place. Yet as she returned to her small home that evening, she found herself standing in the doorway, looking toward the center of town where the saloon lights still glowed. Was he there, enjoying a last night of civilization before returning to the trail? Or was he camped somewhere outside town with the rest of the cattle crew beneath the vast Nevada sky? Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams once again filled with rushing water and the memory of strong arms pulling her wagon and her heart from danger. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. Kate rose early, determined to focus on preparing her classroom rather than dwelling on a certain green-eyed cowboy who was likely already miles from Ely. She had just finished breakfast when a knock came at her door. Thomas Simmons stood on her doorstep, freshly scrubbed and nervous, his hat in his hands. "Good morning, Miss Everett. I've come to offer that tour of town if you're amenable." Kate accepted with a genuine smile. Thomas was a pleasant young man, if somewhat overeager to please. As they walked along Ely's main street, he pointed out the various businesses and introduced her to shopkeepers and residents they encountered. "And that's the Silver Dollar Saloon," Thomas said, gesturing to a two-story building with a wide porch. "Not that a lady such as yourself would have cause to enter such an establishment." Kate noticed his expression darken slightly as he looked at the saloon. "Is something the matter, Mr. Simmons?" Thomas hesitated. "No, madam, just that's where the trouble happened with Kincaid." Kate's interest was immediately piqued. "What trouble?" Thomas glanced around as if concerned about being overheard. "It was 3 years back. There was a card game that got out of hand. A miner accused Kincaid of cheating, pulled a gun. Kincaid was faster." He swallowed. "The miner died." Kate felt her chest tighten. "He killed a man." "Self-defense, according to the witnesses," Thomas said quickly. "Sheriff ruled it justified, but the miner had friends in town, family too. Some folks haven't forgotten." "Including your mother," Kate observed softly. Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. The miner's widow was a friend of hers. She left town afterward, couldn't bear to stay. Mama thinks if Kincaid had just walked away from the game. "But if he was defending himself," Kate protested, "surely he can't be blamed for protecting his own life." Thomas shrugged. "Some say he could have wounded the man, not killed him. Others say he had a reputation for being quick with a gun, that maybe he was looking for trouble. I don't know the truth of it myself. I was just a boy when it happened." Kate absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the man who had so gently calmed her horses and risked himself to save her wagon. A man capable of killing, yet who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. "Anyway," Thomas continued, clearly eager to change the subject, "Kincaid only comes through town a few times a year with the cattle drives. Keeps to himself when he does. Most folks are civil enough." They continued their tour, but Kate's thoughts remained on Fletcher Kincaid and the layers of complexity beneath his quiet exterior. By the time Thomas escorted her back to the schoolhouse, she had resolved to put the cowboy from her mind. He was gone, after all, and she had a classroom to prepare and children to teach. The next week passed in a flurry of activity as Kate organized her schoolroom, reviewed the available books, and prepared lessons. She met many of her future pupils as they came by with their parents, curious about the new schoolmistress from back east. The children ranged from shy to boisterous, but all seemed eager to begin their studies. Kate found herself embraced by the community, invited to dinners and church socials. Thomas Simmons was a frequent visitor, often bringing small gifts, flowers from his mother's garden, a particularly fine apple, once even a ribbon for her hair that matched her blue dress. His intentions were transparent, and while Kate found him pleasant company, she felt none of the spark she had experienced in her brief encounters with Fletcher Kincaid. The school term began with 28 students, 5 more having enrolled in the days before classes started. Kate threw herself into teaching, finding joy in the children's curiosity and progress. Days turned into weeks, and though she occasionally found herself scanning the horizon when out for a walk, hoping to catch sight of a familiar chestnut horse and its rider, Fletcher Kincaid did not return to Ely. October brought cooler weather and the Harvest Festival, a tradition Kate embraced with enthusiasm. Her students performed recitations and songs for the town, showcasing their learning. Parents beamed with pride, and Kate felt a sense of accomplishment unlike any she had known before. It was during the festival, as Kate stood watching children bob for apples, that she first heard rumors of a cattle drive approaching from the south. Dunbar's crew, one of the miners was saying to another. Should be here by week's end. Always good for business when the cowboys come to town. Kate's heart quickened. She had learned that Fletcher Kincaid sometimes rode with Dunbar's outfit. Could he be among them? She chided herself for the flutter of anticipation the thought provoked. 3 months had passed since their brief acquaintance. Surely he had forgotten the bedraggled schoolteacher he'd rescued from the creek. Yet, as the week progressed, Kate found herself taking greater care with her appearance each morning. She told herself it was simply professional pride, but the truth whispered in her ear each time she glanced in the mirror to check her hair. Friday afternoon, as school let out, the distant sound of cattle and the shouts of cowboys drifted into town. Kate's students scattered quickly, eager to watch the herd pass by on its way to the holding pens outside town. Despite her best efforts at dignity, Kate found herself joining the townspeople who lined the main street to watch. The cattle came first, hundreds of them, dusty and bellowing, herded by mounted cowboys who called to each other across the flowing mass of horn and hide. Behind them came the chuck wagon and supply vehicles, the entire procession a testament to the organized chaos that was a cattle drive. Kate searched the faces of the cowboys, her heart in her throat. Most were strangers to her, sunburnt men with trail-weary expressions. Then, riding toward the rear, came a familiar figure on a chestnut horse. Fletcher Kincaid sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. He looked thinner than Kate remembered, his face more weathered from months on the trail. As he passed where she stood, his gaze swept the crowd, pausing when it reached her. For a moment, the bustle and noise of the cattle drive seemed to fade. He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, the ghost of a smile touching his lips before he turned his attention back to the herd. Kate felt as though her feet had taken root in the dusty street. He had recognized her. More importantly, he had remembered her. Martha Simmons materialized at her side, her expression knowing. "I see our wandering cowboy has returned with Dunbar's crew," she observed. "They'll be in town for a few days, I expect, loading up supplies for the winter." "Yes," Kate replied, striving for nonchalance. "Quite a spectacle, isn't it?" The children were very excited. Martha's gaze was shrewd. "Indeed. Speaking of children, Thomas mentioned inviting you to supper this evening. He's quite taken with you, you know." Kate suppressed a sigh. Martha's efforts at matchmaking had become increasingly transparent over the past months. "Thomas is a fine young man," she replied diplomatically. "He has prospects here in Ely," Martha continued. "His father is training him in medicine. He'll make some woman a stable husband." The message was clear. Thomas offered permanence, community standing, respectability, everything a sensible woman should want. Everything Fletcher Kincaid, with his rootless existence and controversial past, could not provide. "I should return to the schoolhouse," Kate said, unwilling to continue the conversation. "I have papers to grade before the weekend." As she walked back to her classroom, Kate was acutely aware that Fletcher Kincaid was now in Ely, perhaps for several days. Would he seek her out? Should she find a reason to encounter him? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. That evening, as Kate declined Thomas's dinner invitation, pleading a headache, which had in fact developed after hours of internal debate about a certain cowboy, a knock came at her door. Thinking it might be Martha checking on her, Kate opened it without asking who called. Fletcher Kincaid stood on her doorstep, hat in hand, freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes, though still trail-worn. His green eyes met hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Miss Everett," he said, his deep voice just as she remembered. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Kate was suddenly, painfully aware of her simple dress and loose hair freed from its pins after the school day. "Mr. Kincaid, this is unexpected." "I saw you in town earlier," he said. "Thought I might pay my respects, see how you're faring in Ely." "Please come in," Kate said, stepping back from the door. As he entered, she was struck by his size in the small room, not just his physical presence, but something more fundamental, as if he carried the vastness of the open range with him. "Your home is comfortable," he observed, glancing around the room that Kate had made her own over the past months with books, a colorful quilt and wildflowers in a jar on the table. It suits me well, she replied, gesturing for him to take a seat at the table while she remained standing, oddly nervous in her own home. How have you been, Mr. Kincaid? The trail must be difficult this time of year. Fletch, he corrected gently. And yes, the weather's turning. We're bringing the herd down from the high country before the snow flies. He hesitated, then added, I've thought of you, Miss Everett, wondered how you were settling in. The simple admission sent warmth flooding through her. It's Kate, she offered in return, and I've settled in quite well. The children are eager learners and the community has been welcoming. I'm glad to hear it, he said, his expression softening. You seem to belong here. There was something in his tone, a wistfulness, perhaps, that made Kate's heart ache. And you, she asked quietly. Do you ever think of settling in one place, Mr. Kincaid Fletch? His eyes darkened slightly. A man like me isn't meant for settling, Kate, not anymore, because of what happened in the Silver Dollar. The words were out before she could stop them. Fletch stiffened, his expression closing. Town gossip travels fast. I'm sorry, Kate said quickly. I shouldn't have mentioned it. It's none of my business. He was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if searching for judgment. Finding none, he seemed to come to a decision. It was self-defense, he said finally, his voice low. Man accused me of cheating, but he was the one with cards up his sleeve. When I called him on it, he went for his gun. He looked down at his hands, strong and capable, resting on the table. I didn't want to kill him. But in that moment, it was him or me. Kate moved to the table, sitting across from him. I believe you. His gaze lifted to meet hers, surprise and something like gratitude in his eyes. Most folks in Ely made up their minds about what happened. Truth didn't much matter after the fact. Is that why you never stay? Kate asked softly. Fletch nodded slowly. Partly, and partly because I've never found a reason strong enough to make me want to. His eyes held hers, and Kate felt the weight of unspoken possibilities between them. Before she could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Fletch immediately stood, his hand instinctively moving toward his hip where Kate suspected a gun would normally rest. Kate, it's Thomas. Mother sent soup for your headache. Kate closed her eyes briefly, gathering her composure. Just a moment, Thomas, she looked at Fletch apologetically. I understand, he said, already moving toward the back door. I'll take my leave. He paused, looking back at her. Dunbar's crew will be in town 3 days. I'd like to see you again before we move on. Tomorrow, Kate said quickly. Meet me at the schoolhouse after lunch. I can show you what your handiwork has helped create. A genuine smile transformed his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Until tomorrow, then. He slipped out the back door just as Kate opened the front to a concerned Thomas bearing a covered pot of soup. You look flushed, Thomas observed. Is your headache worse? Just a little warm in here, Kate replied, accepting the pot with thanks and doing her best to usher him back out the door before he could notice any sign of Fletch's recent presence. That night, Kate slept poorly, her mind full of green eyes and the memory of Fletch's voice saying he'd thought of her during his months away. By morning, she had resolved to be sensible. Fletcher Kincaid was a drifter, a man who by his own admission had never found reason to settle. She was building a life in Ely, establishing herself as a respected teacher. Their paths had crossed by chance, nothing more, yet as she tidied the schoolhouse after morning lessons, preparing for Fletch's visit, her heart refused to heed her mind's counsel. He arrived precisely when promised, his knock on the schoolhouse door sending a flutter through Kate's stomach that no amount of sensible self-talk could suppress. This is impressive, Fletch said as she showed him around the room. You've made it a real place of learning. Kate glowed under his praise, pointing out her students' work displayed on the walls and explaining her teaching methods. Fletch listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a deeper education than his cowboy exterior suggested. You're more than just a trail hand, aren't you? Kate observed as they sat at one of the student desks, knees almost touching in the confined space. Fletch smiled ruefully. My mother was a schoolteacher like you, insisted I read the classics, learn my figures properly. She had hopes I'd become a lawyer or doctor. His expression turned distant. She died when I was 14. After that, it was just Pa and the ranch until the war took him too. I'm sorry, Kate said softly. My parents died during the war as well. Fever took them both within weeks of each other. "We're a pair of orphans, then," Fletch said, his eyes warm with shared understanding, "making our way as best we can." "Some might say I've found my way," Kate ventured. "Teaching suits me. Ely is becoming home. You belong here," Fletch agreed. "The children clearly adore you." "The town respects you. And you?" Kate asked, suddenly bold. "Where do you belong, Fletch?" He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "I used to think the open trail was where I belonged. No ties, no expectations, no one to disappoint or be disappointed by." He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now I'm not so certain," Kate's breath caught at his touch. "What's changed? I keep thinking about a woman I pulled from a river," he said softly. "A woman with courage and determination who's made a place for herself in a town that's never fully accepted me. Perhaps the town could change its mind," Kate whispered. "People can change." "Can they?" Fletch's voice held a note of doubt, but his eyes never left hers. "I believe so," Kate said. "With reason enough." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Fletch leaned forward slightly, his intent clear in his eyes. Kate's heart hammered in her chest as she closed the distance between them. Their lips had barely touched when the schoolhouse door burst open. They sprang apart as Martha Simmons stood in the doorway, her expression moving from shock to disapproval in an instant. "Miss Everett, I came to discuss the Thanksgiving pageant, but I see you're occupied." Her gaze cut to Fletch, who had risen to his feet, his posture rigid. "Mr. Kincaid." "Mrs. Simmons," he acknowledged with a tight nod. "I was just leaving. Thank you for the tour of the schoolroom, Miss Everett." The formality in his tone cut Kate to the quick. She wanted to protest, to ask him to stay, but the weight of Martha's disapproving stare held her in place. "Good day, Mr. Kincaid," she managed, hating the propriety that had suddenly reasserted itself between them. She watched helplessly as Fletch strode from the schoolroom, his shoulders set in a tense line. When he had gone, Martha turned to her, concern and disappointment warring on her round face. "Katherine, I'm surprised at you, entertaining a man alone in the schoolhouse, and Fletcher Kincaid of all people." "He helped build this schoolhouse," Kate defended, struggling to keep her voice level. "He was interested in seeing how it was being used." "I'm sure that was his only interest," Martha replied, her skepticism clear. "Katherine, you must consider your position in this community. A schoolteacher must be above reproach in her conduct." "There was nothing improper in Mr. Kincaid's visit," Kate insisted, though the near kiss they'd shared belied her words. Martha sighed, her expression softening slightly. "My dear, I know you're a grown woman with a mind of your own, but Fletcher Kincaid is complicated. He has a past in this town, a reputation, and more importantly, he's not the staying kind." She reached out to pat Kate's hand. "Thomas, now he admires you greatly. He has prospects here, a future to offer." "I appreciate your concern," Kate said stiffly, "but my personal affairs are my own." Martha drew back, clearly stung by Kate's tone. "Of course, I spoke out of genuine care for your well-being, but you're right, it's not my place to interfere." She straightened her shoulders. "Now, about the Thanksgiving pageant." The rest of the afternoon passed in strained discussion of the upcoming school event, but Kate's thoughts remained with Fletch and the interrupted moment that had promised so much. Would he seek her out again? Or would Martha's interruption convince him that pursuing any connection with Ely's schoolteacher was folly? That evening, Kate paced her small home, debating whether to go into town in hopes of encountering Fletch. Such a move would certainly fuel gossip, especially after Martha had witnessed their near kiss. But the alternative, letting him leave in 3 days' time without resolving what lay between them, was unthinkable. A knock at her door sent her heart racing, but it was Thomas who stood on her doorstep, hat in hand and an earnest smile on his face. "Miss Everett, Katherine," he began, "I wondered if you might accompany me to the social at the church tomorrow evening. They're raising funds for the Christmas celebration." Kate hesitated, torn between kindness and honesty. Thomas was a good man, steady and reliable. In another life, perhaps she could have developed feelings for him, but her heart had chosen a different path, however unwise. "Thomas, you've been very kind," she said gently, "but I must be honest with you, I don't believe I can return your feelings in the way you deserve." His face fell, though he tried to maintain his smile. Is there someone else? Kate thought of denying it, but couldn't bring herself to lie. Yes, she admitted softly. Though I don't know if anything will come of it, understanding dawned in Thomas's eyes. It's Kincaid, isn't it? Mother mentioned she found you together at the schoolhouse. Your mother shouldn't be discussing such matters, Kate said, a flash of irritation cutting through her sympathy. She worries about you, Thomas defended. We all do. Kincaid's not. He's not the type to settle down, not here, not anywhere. Perhaps people can change, Kate suggested. If given reason enough. Thomas shook his head sadly. Some men are born to wander, Katherine. It's in their blood. Kincaid's been drifting since before the war. What makes you think you can change him? The question struck home, piercing Kate's fragile hope. What did she truly know of Fletcher Kincaid? A few brief encounters, a rescued wagon, a nearly shared kiss. Was she building castles in the air, imagining a future with a man whose very nature resisted permanence? I should go, Thomas said, interpreting her silence correctly. I hope whatever you decide brings you happiness, Katherine. You deserve that much. After he left, Kate wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The stars blazed overhead, countless pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere in town, Fletcher Kincaid was perhaps looking at these same stars, perhaps thinking of her or perhaps already preparing for the next stretch of trail. His thoughts turned to the journey ahead rather than the schoolteacher he was leaving behind. The following day passed in a fog of uncertainty. Kate went through her teaching duties mechanically, her mind elsewhere. As the children filed out at the end of the day, she made her decision. She would go to the Silver Dollar Saloon and find Fletch. Propriety be damned, she needed to know if what had sparked between them was worth pursuing. She changed into her best dress, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion. As she pinned her hair, she rehearsed what she might say. How does one ask a drifting cowboy if he's ever considered staying in one place? How does one offer one's heart without seeming desperate or foolish? The sun was setting as Kate made her way toward town, her steps determined despite her inner turmoil. The Silver Dollar's lights were visible from a distance, a beacon of activity in the gathering dusk. As she approached, the sounds of piano music and raucous laughter spilled into the street. Kate hesitated at the batwing doors. No respectable woman entered a saloon unescorted. If she crossed this threshold, there would be talk. Her reputation as a teacher could suffer. Martha Simmons would be scandalized, but if she didn't enter, Fletch might ride away tomorrow, taking with him possibilities Kate wasn't ready to relinquish. Drawing a deep breath, she pushed through the doors. The interior of the Silver Dollar was hazy with smoke, the air thick with the smell of whiskey and unwashed bodies. Conversation faltered as heads turned toward the unexpected arrival of the schoolteacher. Kate scanned the room, her heart sinking when she didn't immediately spot Fletch's tall figure. Miss Everett, a voice drawled from behind the bar. This ain't exactly your usual haunt. Kate recognized the bartender as Mr. Wilson, father to one of her students. Good evening, Mr. Wilson. I'm looking for Fletcher Kincaid. Is he here? Wilson's eyebrows rose, but he offered no comment on her purpose. Haven't seen him tonight. Dunbar's crew was in earlier, but they headed back to camp outside town. Some trouble brewing with rustlers in the area. They didn't want to leave the herd unguarded. Disappointment washed over Kate. I see, thank you. As she turned to leave, Wilson called after her, Miss Everett, Kincaid's a good man, despite what some in town might say. But he's got ghosts that keep him moving. Takes something powerful, strong to overcome that kind of restlessness. Kate nodded, acknowledging the bartender's unexpected insight. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The walk back to her home seemed longer, each step heavier than the last. What had she been thinking? That she could waltz into a saloon and declare her feelings for a man she barely knew. That Fletcher Kincaid would suddenly decide to abandon the life he'd led for years because of a schoolteacher he'd met by chance. Thomas's words echoed in her mind. Some men are born to wander. It's in their blood. Perhaps she was the fool Martha clearly thought her to be, pinning hopes on a drifter when a steady, respectable man like Thomas Simmons offered constancy and security. As her small house came into view, Kate noticed a figure sitting on her front step. Her heart leapt before reason could temper it. In the dim light, she recognized Fletcher Kincaid's broad shoulders and the tilt of his hat. "Fletch," she breathed as she approached. "I was looking for you." He stood, his expression serious in the gathering darkness. "I figured we had unfinished business after yesterday's interruption. Mrs. Simmons has strong opinions about what's best for me," Kate said, moving past him to unlock her door. "Please come inside." Once within, she lit the lamp, its warm glow casting long shadows across the room. Fletch stood near the door, hat in hand, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his posture. "I heard you went to the Silver Dollar looking for me," he said, watching her carefully. Kate felt her cheeks warm. "Word travels fast, in a town this size, faster than a prairie fire." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "That was a risk to your reputation, Kate. Teachers are held to a certain standard. Some things are worth risking for," she replied simply. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Fletch took a step toward her, then stopped, as if holding himself back. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "Dunbar's pushing the herd to the railhead before the first big snow." "I know." Kate moved to the table, needing its support as she faced what might be their final conversation. "I can't offer you what Thomas Simmons can," Fletch continued, his voice rough. "No house in town, no steady income, no standing in the community." "I haven't asked you for those things," Kate pointed out. "But you deserve them," he countered. "You deserve security, respect. A man who can give you a proper life, not one who drifts from job to job with nothing but his horse and saddle to his name." "Perhaps what I deserve is to choose for myself what I want," Kate said, a flash of anger lending strength to her voice. "Not to have Mrs. Simmons or anyone else decide what's proper for me." Fletch's expression softened. "And what do you want, Kate?" The question hung in the air between them, demanding an honesty that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "I want to know if what I feel when I'm with you, what I've felt since you pulled my wagon from the creek, is something real," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or if I'm simply another town along your endless trail, soon to be forgotten once you've moved on." Fletch crossed the room in 3 long strides, closing the distance between them. His hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "You could never be forgotten, Katherine Everett," he said, his voice husky. "You've haunted my thoughts for months. Every town, every trail, every night beneath the stars you were there, just out of reach." Kate's breath caught in her throat. "Then why are you determined to leave?" "Because staying means facing down more than just the town's opinion of me," he admitted. "It means believing I could be more than what I've become, a man with no roots, no future beyond the next job." His thumbs traced the curve of her cheekbones. "It means believing I deserve a chance at happiness after taking another man's life, justified or not." "You do deserve happiness," Kate insisted, covering his hands with her own. "We all do, even wandering cowboys with troubled pasts." Something shifted in Fletch's expression, a softening, a lowering of defenses long maintained. "If I stayed," he said carefully, "or at least came back to Ely between jobs, could you consider?" Kate didn't let him finish. Rising on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his, pouring into the kiss all the longing, hope, and certainty she felt. After a moment's surprise, Fletch responded with equal fervor, his arms encircling her waist and drawing her against him. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Fletch rested his forehead against hers. "That wasn't exactly how I planned this conversation," he said, a smile in his voice. "I find actions sometimes speak more clearly than words," Kate replied, her own smile blooming. "In that case," Fletch said, stepping back slightly though his hands remained at her waist, "let me be very clear about my intentions, Miss Everett." His expression grew serious. "I can't promise to change overnight. The trail's been my home for too long. But I can promise to try to find work that brings me back to Ely, to you, regularly. And maybe in time to see if this wandering cowboy might find a home where his heart already seems determined to stay." Tears pricked at Kate's eyes. "That's all I ask. A chance to discover what we might become together." "It won't be easy," he warned. "There will be talk. Martha Simmons alone will likely organize a committee to save you from yourself." Kate laughed despite the truth in his words. "I can handle Martha Simmons." The question is, can you handle the scrutiny that comes with courting the town school teacher? For you, Fletch said, his green eyes warm with promise, I believe I could face down considerably worse. Their lips met again, sealing an agreement more binding than any contract. When Fletch left hours later, after conversation that ranged from childhood memories to hopes for the future, it was with the promise to return in 2 months' time, once the cattle had been delivered and winter work arranged. The following morning, Kate stood with the rest of the town to watch Dunbar's outfit depart, the cattle lowing as they were driven north toward the railhead. Fletcher Kincaid rode past the schoolhouse where she waited, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that carried meaning only the two of them understood. Martha Simmons appeared at Kate's side as the last of the cowboys disappeared from view. I hope you know what you're doing, Katherine, she said without preamble. A woman in your position can't afford to become the subject of gossip. I appreciate your concern, Kate replied, keeping her voice level, but my heart and my future are my own to determine. Even if that future includes a man like Fletcher Kincaid, Martha pressed. Especially then, Kate affirmed. We all deserve a chance at happiness, Mrs. Simmons, even those whose paths have taken unexpected turns. Martha studied her for a long moment, then sighed, her expression softening. You've brought so much to our school, to our children, I would hate to see you hurt or disappointed. Life offers no guarantees, Kate said gently, but some risks are worth taking. With that, she turned and walked back into her classroom, ready to face her students and the waiting period ahead. 2 months suddenly seemed both endlessly long and reassuringly finite. The weeks passed more quickly than Kate had anticipated, filled with teaching, holiday preparations, and increasingly friendly overtures from townspeople who had initially been reserved in their welcome. Even Thomas Simmons had moved past his disappointment, treating Kate with respectful friendship when they encountered each other in town. December brought the first heavy snows, blanketing Ely in white and turning Kate's thoughts anxiously to the trails Fletch would travel to return to her. Had he reached the railhead safely? Was he finding his way back through the winter storms 2 days before Christmas? As Kate was decorating the schoolroom for the holiday pageant, the door opened, letting in a blast of cold air and a snow-dusted Fletcher Kincaid. Fletch. Kate exclaimed, dropping the paper chains she'd been hanging. You're here, he stamped the snow from his boots, his face ruddy from the cold but his eyes warm as they found hers. Promised I'd be back by Christmas, didn't I? Kate crossed the room in a rush, propriety forgotten as she threw her arms around him. His coat was cold and damp, but beneath it she could feel the solid warmth of him, real and present after weeks of waiting. The trails must have been terrible with the snow, she said, drawing back to study his face. He looked tired but whole, the lines around his eyes crinkling as he smiled down at her. Worth every frozen mile, he assured her, brushing a light kiss across her lips. I've taken a job with the Box K Ranch for the winter. It's only an hour's ride from town. Joy bubbled up in Kate's chest. So you'll be nearby, for how long? Through spring at least, Fletch confirmed. The ranch owner needs hands to see his stock through the winter. And come spring, he's expanding his operation. Might be a permanent position if I prove myself. Fletch, that's wonderful, Kate beamed, her heart light with possibilities. Will you come to the Christmas pageant tomorrow evening? My students have been practicing for weeks. Wouldn't miss it, he promised. Though I should warn you, I've already received a rather pointed welcome from Mrs. Simmons. Ran into her at the general store, Kate groaned. What did she say? That if I break your heart, she'll personally ensure no ranch within 100 miles will hire me, he replied, amusement dancing in his eyes. I believe she's coming around to the idea of us in her own way. Kate laughed, the sound echoing in the empty schoolroom. Martha's protective, but she means well. Given time, I think she'll see what I see in you. And what's that? Fletch asked, his tone teasing though his eyes held a vulnerability that tugged at Kate's heart. A good man, she said simply. One who saved not just my wagon that day at the creek, but who's been saving me in small ways ever since. One who's brave enough to try changing the course of his life for the possibility of something permanent. Fletch drew her close again, his expression solemn. I can't promise I won't sometimes hear the call of the open trail, Kate. It's been my life for so long. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not, she assured him, only to include me in whatever path you choose. That, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, is a promise I can make with absolute certainty. The Christmas pageant the following evening marked Fletcher Kincaid's official introduction to Ely society as Katherine Everett's suitor. He sat in the front row, hat on his knee as the children performed their carefully rehearsed pieces. Kate, directing the proceedings, caught his eye during a musical number and felt her heart swell at the pride and affection she saw there. After the performance, as parents and townspeople mingled over cider and cookies, Martha Simmons approached where Kate and Fletch stood greeting her students' families. "A lovely pageant, Miss Everett," Martha said, her smile genuine if slightly reserved. "The children performed admirably." She turned to Fletch, her expression becoming measured. "Mr. Kincaid, I understand you've taken a position at the Box K for the winter." "Yes, madam," Fletch confirmed, his posture respectful but unintimidated. "Mr. Kendrick has been kind enough to offer me steady work." "Harold Kendrick is a good judge of character," Martha allowed, something in her tone suggesting surprise that Fletch had passed that judgment. "I trust you'll be attending church services while you're in the area." "I plan to, Mrs. Simmons," Fletch replied, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "Miss Everett has been most persuasive on the benefits of regular worship." Kate bit back a smile at the diplomatic response. She'd made no such argument, but Fletch clearly understood the importance of church attendance in gaining community acceptance. Martha nodded approvingly. "Well then, I expect we'll be seeing more of you in Ely." She hesitated, then added with apparent effort, "You would be welcome to join us for Sunday dinner sometime. Thomas speaks highly of your horsemanship." The olive branch, however tentatively extended, was significant. Kate squeezed Fletch's arm encouragingly. "That's very kind, Mrs. Simmons," he replied. "I'd be honored to accept." As Martha moved away to speak with other parents, Fletch leaned close to Kate's ear. "Did I just agree to the most uncomfortable dinner of my life?" Kate laughed softly. "Probably, but it's a start. Martha's influence in town is considerable. If she begins to accept you, others will follow." The winter passed in a rhythm that soon became familiar and cherished. Fletch rode into town every Saturday afternoon, staying through Sunday services before returning to the Box K. During his visits, he and Kate would walk through the snow-covered streets, take meals together at the hotel restaurant, and spend long evenings by the fire in her small home, talking, reading aloud to each other, or simply enjoying a companionable silence that grew more comfortable with each passing week. The town's initial wariness toward Fletcher Kincaid gradually thawed as he became a regular presence in Ely. His invitation to the Simmons Sunday dinner expanded to a standing arrangement twice monthly. Even the widow who had lost her husband in the saloon incident years before was seen exchanging civil greetings with Fletch outside the general store. By early spring, as the snow began to melt and the first crocuses pushed through the softening earth, talk had turned to Fletcher and Katherine's future. No formal announcement had been made, but their courtship was an acknowledged fact in Ely society. The question on everyone's lips was whether the former drifter would truly settle down, or if the schoolteacher would find herself abandoned when the open trail called once more. Kate refused to entertain such doubts, at least outwardly. But in the privacy of her thoughts, especially on nights when spring storms delayed Fletch's weekly visit, she sometimes wondered if Thomas Simmons had been right about men born to wander. It was on one such stormy evening in April, lightning splitting the sky as rain pounded against her windows, that a drenched Fletcher Kincaid appeared at her door long after she'd given up hope of seeing him until the weather cleared. "Fletch," she exclaimed, pulling him inside. "You rode in this." "You could have waited until morning." He removed his dripping hat, water streaming from his coat onto her floor. "Couldn't wait," he said, his expression intense beneath the wetness. "Needed to see you tonight." Something in his tone sent a shiver of apprehension through Kate. "What is it?" "Has something happened?" Fletch ran a hand through his wet hair, sending droplets flying. Kendrick offered me a permanent position today, foreman of his North Range. It's good work, steady pay, a cabin of my own on the property. Relief flooded Kate's body. Fletch, that's wonderful news. Why would you ride through a storm to tell me something so? She stopped, registering his troubled expression. Unless you're not going to accept it, that depends, he said, his voice rough with emotion. On what? Kate asked, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. Fletch reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, closed in his fist. On whether you'd be willing to live in a ranch foreman's cabin, miles from your school and the town you've made your home. He opened his hand to reveal a simple gold band with a small, perfect diamond. On whether you'd be willing to become my wife. Kate stared at the ring, then at Fletch's face, rain-washed and vulnerable in the lamplight. You're asking me to marry you? I am, he confirmed, his voice steadying. I love you, Katherine Everett. Have since the day you threw your arms around me at the creek, soaking wet and more alive than any woman I'd ever met. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I know it's asking a lot. You've built a life here, earned the town's respect. The ranch is a fair distance, yes, Kate interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. Fletch blinked as if uncertain he'd heard correctly. Yes, Fletcher Kincaid, I will marry you, Kate affirmed, her smile breaking through the tears. I love you. I have since you pulled my wagon from the river, maybe even before I fully realized it. Fletch's face transformed, joy erasing the worry that had lined his features. With slightly trembling hands, he slid the ring onto her finger, then drew her into an embrace that conveyed more than words ever could. What about the school? He asked when they finally broke apart, his forehead resting against hers. I won't ask you to give up teaching if it's what makes you happy. Kate considered the question, her mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps I could teach at the ranch for the children of the workers, or ride into town several days a week. She smiled up at him. We'll find a solution together. That's what matters, that we're facing the future together. Fletch's answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of all the years to come. Their wedding took place in June, with wildflowers carpeting the hills around Ely and the entire town turning out to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the cowboy who had won her heart. Martha Simmons, fully converted to Fletcher Kincaid's champion, had organized much of the celebration, declaring it would be the social event of the year. Standing before the minister in the church she had come to love, Kate looked into Fletch's eyes as they spoke their vows and knew with absolute certainty that her heart had chosen rightly. The man who had once been a drifter had found his home not in a place, but in a person. After the ceremony, as they greeted well-wishers outside the church, Wilson the bartender approached with a wrapped package. Wedding gift, he said gruffly, handing it to Fletch. Something to remember where it all began. Curious, Fletch unwrapped the parcel to reveal a detailed carving of a wagon crossing a river, a mounted cowboy reaching down to help. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every detail rendered with care. Wilson, Fletch said, genuinely moved, this is incredible. The bartender shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. My father taught me whittling, don't get much chance to practice these days. He nodded toward the carving. Figured you ought to have something to remind you how this all started. Her wagon was stuck in the river, you pulled it free. And my heart followed, Kate finished softly, touching the carved figures with gentle fingers. It's perfect, thank you. As Wilson moved away, Fletch wrapped an arm around Kate's waist, drawing her close against his side. He got that right, you know. It was your wagon I pulled from the creek that day, but it was you who rescued me from the drift I'd been in for years. Kate leaned into his embrace, contentment filling her like the golden sunlight that bathed the churchyard. Then I'd say we rescued each other, Mr. Kincaid. That we did, Mrs. Kincaid, Fletch agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. That we most certainly did. As they departed Ely that afternoon, bound for their new home at the Box K Ranch, Kate looked back at the town that had welcomed her, challenged her, and ultimately blessed her union with a man many had once viewed with suspicion. The schoolhouse where she had taught would now see a new teacher, though Kate had arranged to continue instructing the ranch children and riding into town once a week for special lessons. The road ahead held uncertainties, as all futures do. But as Fletcher's arm tightened around her waist, Kate knew one thing with unshakable conviction. Her heart had chosen well when it followed the cowboy who had pulled her wagon free.